Ooh, now we get to talk about the horror frog.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, we're up to this part. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the series premiere of Pokebiology, an edutainment program where I will be discussing the origins and inspirations behind the hundreds and hundreds of Pokemon that Game Freak has designed over the years. Today, we're going to be discussing the family that started it all, Bulbasaur and its evolutions, Ivysaur and Venusaur. Now, alongside the fire Pokemon Charmander and the water Pokemon Squirtle, Bulbasaur established the tradition of having 3 options for starter Pokemon that new players could pick from. A grass Pokemon, a fire Pokemon, and a water Pokemon. This tradition has remained unbroken since the series first premiered with Pokemon Red and Blue, and the designs of these 3 starter Pokemon have been the bar by which future starters have been judged. Unlike Charmander and Squirtle, Bulbasaur's name is not entirely indicative of its origins. Despite including the suffix "saur" in its name, no dinosaurs actually inspired the designs for Bulbasaur or its evolutions. There is one type of prehistoric reptile that the line is heavily inspired by, but we'll be discussing them in more detail later. The dinosaur confusion is only present in the English versions of these Pokemon's names. The Japanese translation of Bulbasaur's name, in fact, directly translates to "isn't it strange?" implying that Bulbasaur was always intended to be some sort of chimera instead of a direct representation of a particular kind of animal. In one interview, Game Freak's lead character designer Ken Sugimura said that Bulbasaur and its evolutions were inspired by the appearance and mannerisms of real-life frogs and toads. However, he didn't specify a particular species or family as the inspiration. With a little bit of inferencing and research, however, we can begin to narrow it down. Based on the Venusaur family's poison typing and the smooth, speckled skin found in Bulbasaur and Ivysaur, we can infer that the line is at least partially based on the Dendrobatidae, or poison dart frog, family. Furthermore, the bumps on Bulbasaur's ears and that cover Venusaur's skin are likely inspired by parotid glands. These glands are found in many kinds of toads and frogs, such as the cane toad and the numerous species of poison dart frog. These glands secrete poison of varying effectiveness depending on the species they're found on. The toad inspiration is much more apparent in Venusaur, whose bumpy skin strongly resembles that of the Bufonidae family of frogs, also known as true toads. These are the toads that you commonly associate with having bumpy, rough-looking skin, as opposed to the rest of the families of frogs, which lack this. The color and body shape of the line, on the other hand, are most likely derived from tree frogs, also known as the Hylidae family. This is especially apparent in the chunkier members of the tree frog family, including White's tree frog and the barking tree frog of Florida. The tree and poison dart frog families in particular may very well have inspired the plant-slash-animal hybrid biology exhibited by Bulbasaur and its kin. For starters, poison dart frogs and tree frogs are both strictly arboreal. They need trees to facilitate all aspects of their life, and both families are only found in dense tropical rainforests. Most types of poison dart frogs and tree frogs rely on plants for all aspects of their life cycle, including their infancy, as they lay their eggs inside water-filled rosettes or banana leaves. The tadpoles grow up in the relative safety of their plant homes, feeding on invertebrates until they are ready to metamorphosize. Perhaps Game Freak wanted to invert this concept and have a plant that is dependent on an animal for sustenance instead of the other way around. In regards to the clawed feet exhibited by Bulbasaur and its evolutions, this is a trait commonly lacked by amphibians. However, there is an exception to every rule, and the exception in this case is a type of frog found in Central Africa. Known as the hairy frog, the frog got its name from these weird hair-like growths on its legs, but that's not actually why we're talking about it today. Why we are talking about it today is because of its other common name, the incredibly metal moniker that is the horror frog. This frog has Wolverine-esque retractable claws. When it feels threatened, it intentionally breaks the skin on its own toes to reveal these protruding claws. And over time, the skin grows back over the claws, healing them. You may have noticed that I haven't really been discussing the flower that grows on Bulbasaur's back as it evolves, and that's because, to be frank, there really isn't a lot to say. Its design is superficially based on that of a Rafflesia, or corpse flower. However, there's a Pokemon that is much more heavily inspired by the Rafflesia, so I'm going to save that discussion for when we cover Vileplume and Blossom sometime in the future. For the origins of Ivysaur and Venusaur's prominent pair of tusks, it's time we take a little dive into paleontology. The animal about to discuss is the family of reptiles I briefly mentioned at the beginning of the episode. This family can be cited as an inspiration for numerous aspects of Bulbasaur, Ivysaur's, and Venusaur's designs, including their squat, stocky bodies, their short legs, and their clawed feet. In other words, most of the more reptilian aspects. This family is known as the Echidnodonts, which literally translates in Latin to two dog teeth, on account of the two tusks protruding from the roof of their mouth. The Echidnodonts were synapsids, the class of amniotic vertebrate that includes all mammals and their direct ancestors. Amniotes are organisms that essentially lay eggs that are closed off to the outside environment. Fish and amphibians are not amniotes because their eggs are not solid. They lack the outer shell. The Echidnodonts are one of said ancestors, part of a group of reptiles that existed shortly before the time of the dinosaurs, known as the mammal-like reptiles. As indicated by the name, these mammal-like reptiles are some of our earliest evolutionary ancestors. Fossil records indicate that the Echidnodonts first appeared during the Permian period about 268 million years ago. These herbivores ranged in size from rodent-adjacent to the size of an ox, and didn't really have a lot of natural predators during their time. They also had a turtle-like beak that they would use for uprooting or shearing vegetation. A beak not so different than the one that appears on Ivysaur's design. Although they had few natural predators, the environmental devastation wrought by the Permian extinction spelled the beginning of the end for the Echidnodonts. For those unaware, the Permian extinction is the single largest extinction event in all of Earth's history, even outdoing the one that killed the dinosaurs. It was responsible for the erasure of 90% of Earth's life, including many species of prehistoric reptile. The few families that survived the Permian extinction actually made somewhat of a rebound during the Triassic. By the Middle Triassic period, the Echidnodonts were the largest land herbivores in the world, and they'd actually managed to spread out across multiple continents. Unfortunately, by the end of the Triassic, they had run out of steam, being steadily replaced by the newly emerged sauropod dinosaurs that would become the main herbivores on Earth during the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. In conclusion, the origins and inspiration behind Bulbasaur wound up being a bit more complicated than I expected them to be. Still, I welcome any opportunity to talk about prehistoric life. And speaking of prehistoric life, paleontologists announced back in 2008 that they had discovered a massive, well, comparatively, it was 41 inches, prehistoric frog that lived in the Cretaceous period on Madagascar. This frog was known as Beelzebufo ampigna, also known as the Frog from Hell. This monster from Madagascar, which was about the size of a cat, had a skull that was 15 centimeters wide, and a mouth more than large enough to stuff whatever unfortunate prey it wanted inside. This unfortunate prey included the juveniles of many dinosaurs that were living in the area at the time, including a large theropod, not as large as T-Rex, but still pretty large, named Majungasaurus, also known as the Majunga lizard. With a bite force of anywhere from 500 to 2,200 newtons, this frog could just straight up crush the bones of whatever poor animal wound up near it. Well, that's it for this time on Pokebiology. I am your host, Michael Catalano, and tune in next time when we discuss the holy grail of TCG collectors everywhere, Charizard.